what we have is a life experience that is a series of efforts to get paid, right? And pay less and get paid more. Suffer less, have positive life experiences more. Now, there's a certain amount of suffering of a sort that's pure and true that's different than suffering you want to avoid. I mean, certain parts of life are necessary. At some point, if things go as they ought to, in my sense is the word, like how you'd like them to, at some point you're gonna have to see your parents die if you haven't already. I have both my parents still. The only deaths I've experienced have been, my grandmother when I was 18, she died. My grandfather when I was in 5th grade, he died. And my childhood friend committed suicide when he was in his late 20s, early 30s, I don't know. That's the worst of them by far, right? And it's like, I didn't even know he died until like a year later, which was sickening because he was in the neighborhood. He wasn't far. He was depressing, kind of, It's like, oh, this poor guy, it didn't work out for him, And I didn't do anything, I didn't know. I mean, I knew I failed. I failed to fulfill my duty as a human being and a friend. And give him the attention he needed. And I failed because of my own weaknesses, I don't know how I got on that topic. So, I mean, with some of the suffering, you see there where I'm talking about pure suffering and not pure suffering. And with my grandmother, that's not even suffering if it's pure, almost. Her death, the extent to which I suffer, or suffered then, and it didn't really suffer then because I was such a callous 18-year-old. I was too narcissistic and self-absorbed to care, frankly. I suffered later when I reflected upon how I didn't necessarily treat her that well when I was during my teen years. And, my mom didn't treat her that well either, to be frank, and I think that I took her lead on that, and I think that we needed to be kinder to my grandmother. And we were not kind enough, and I was not kind enough, and I feel terrible about it. So, I mean, there's suffering, right? The suffering's not even from my grandmother's death, it's from my own failures while she was alive. And that's where the suffering seems to come from always, right? For us here in the first world, this is a first world problem, right? I mean, I'm guessing that someone whose home was taken over by ISIL and whose, the father of the family was killed and the daughters made into sex slaves, and maybe the wife and a couple young sons left there to maintain ownership of that property in some macabre pantomime of just awfulness. I mean, I don't even know what to call that. I have no fancy words to describe how awful that fucking is, right? They're not saying, and it's insulting to even try to be fancy with it, except it's so distant, you tend to forget that. It's important to tell those stories harsh sometimes. They don't think their failures are self-inflicted. They're not like, suffering almost always comes from my own personal failures. Because I'm not realized enough as a person. Yeah, well, no, that's not how they think about it at all, because their reality is so vastly different from me. But that too, it proves my central point, which is all about how our narratives are our realities, and how we have the choice to determine what the events in our life mean. So, back to the topic, emotions. No matter how well you deal with the narratives, you can't help but have some feelings sometimes. You can't just process events instantly into the meaning you want them to be. It takes some time, because, for one thing, the analytical process is not instant. You tend to settle on certain ideas, test them for solidity, sort of tentatively at first. That does seem pretty solid. And I start stomping around on it. Some of those ideas end up collapsing after you've been stomping on them for a while. And you want ones that don't collapse at all. So what's the guy to do who's facing a set of emotions of whatever sort, positive or negative or whatever? For example, right now, I've got a lot of emotions at the an elementary tournament. Sort of means a lot to me. Same time, I know if it doesn't go the way I want it, I'll spend it the way I want it later. It'll be fine. Whatever. At the end of the day, it's kind of like an underlying philosophy on everything. Underneath all the fancy talk, it boils down to, I'm going to keep trying to do the right thing. I'm going to keep indulging in my mythologies and stuff. I'm going to keep being crazy. And what I hope is a genuinely good and helpful way. I think I can fairly say it is. And I'm going to keep processing all of the experiences I have into as large a narrative as I can. I want to know that every day I can better understand. If I look down from above this set of slabs called Eric Strauss, that it all fits together with the larger narratives we all share, and the narratives that I believe can be positively influenced by my narratives. I think there are some, for some people. My hope is to shape my own little corner, weave it around a bunch of existing pieces, little links here and there. Let it grow. See if it impacts anything. I don't know. Maybe other people will be influenced by it. I can't see it. That's the other thing, is see if it. There's no seeing it. There's no seeing any outcomes. You can't tell. Why should you think you ought to be able to tell? The thing is, you ought to be able to tell. This is one of those, another example of this thing, right? You have to be able to tell. And the reason you ought to be able to tell is because you should be able to reference everything that everybody does and says and thinks. We can't see the thinking, but does and says and sees and where they go and what's going on all at all times, everywhere, at every moment, every day. If we had that, I could say, oh, look, that guy read that thing and he talked about it later. And you can see the clear, what's that word? Chain. Clear chain from A to B to C. And that'd be cool. And you could see how much impact you talking about it had. But what would also be cool is other people would be able to say, like for me, what I talk about, the links are very diffuse because I guess because I'm making it up more than I am reading it. I do read things sometimes. I want to get some ideas, but I don't want to get a lot of ideas. I don't want to be influenced too much. But sometimes I think it's probably dumb. I guess it's more like I don't care what other people have to say. It annoys me that I'm expected to care. I don't know. Who cares what they have to say about it? I'm thinking about it right now. But if you want to think about it a little faster, maybe you should see what they have to say about it. They've already done a bunch of thinking about it. Why don't you just build up their work? Because I don't want it to be like that. I want it to come together organically as a unique, distinct entity. Not unique like shares nothing in common with other things, doesn't reference anything else, but that it references other things after the fact. Like, I mean, to a certain extent, I can't do this because I know too much, but and then this idea. Oh, and I later found out that this idea that I'm talking about here actually is well established in literature and it's over here. It's by this guy. Right? I'm okay with coming up with ideas that have already been come up with and then giving them credit like they thought of this first. But I don't want other people's stuff to shape the stuff I have to work with, the clay. I don't want other people's ideas to shape for me what sort of shapes the clays ought to be. You know what I'm saying? If I look at a given thing, here's a product line, and I notice that, and let's say it's some kind of paint, and the distinction is the particulates that the paint's have in them. And so then somebody says, okay, now open your paint store, and how are you going to distinguish between your kinds of paints? You're going to be like particulates. And you see it with kids all the time, right? They can't. Their original ideas are all variations on your idea. They're not usually actual different ideas. So it's nice to operate in a vacuum-ish sort of place, a vacuum cleaner store. Because if you need to buy a vacuum cleaner, all of a sudden, abruptly find yourself in need of purchasing a vacuum cleaner, what better place to be than a vacuum cleaner store? No better place. It's an interesting argument, right? Instead of a conditional, right? Mom, I'm lost. I got out of my car. I'm at some library, and it looks like they're having some kind of book festival. Well, it sounds like you're in the right place. If you are looking for a place to buy books that really focuses on the literary value and educational value of the books as well, And since you're still just a young adult, you might want to purchase some of the materials they have there at this book fair that are for the younger audiences, or it's great that you're at the library. They've also got book fair things for the older audiences. So if you are in fact in the market for a book, you're in the right place. Yeah, Mom, I know, but first of all, I've got an enormous phone. Second of all, I'm on my way to the hospital, remember? I'm giving birth to a child right now. I'm not. So the first, basically what I'm saying is, the antecedent of your condition was false, so obviously the antecedents, the consequences are irrelevant. So, yeah, I'm lost, and that's why I called to tell you that. I'm trying to get to the hospital. You said you were going to meet me there. Where are you? Why, I'm in the book fair too. I can never pass up a good book fair. Are you kidding me? Where else would I be? But Mom, I'm pregnant. Mom has a lapel mic, I guess, because she doesn't have her phone in her hand. I know you're pregnant. Good thing I came here. I told you to go to the hospital. You show up at the book fair. If I hadn't been here, what would you do? Now, get in that car and go to the hospital. But Mom, aren't you going to come with me? No! I'm staying here at the book fair. I got a lot more books to buy. Okay, there you go. That's how you handle emotions, right? You feel emotions, feel stress, feel worry, feel anxiety, maybe feel a little bit sad or whatever. You gotta tell yourself some funny jokes. There. Eric cures depression.